Toastmaster of the day, fellow Toastmasters and guests. I didn't want to give this speech. At the end of the path, after you complete level 5, there is one more speech you need to give before Toastmasters will give you credit for completing a path. The project is called Reflect on Your Path, and the time is supposed to be from 10 to 12 minutes. I love speaking about things I know about, and I love teaching people. But I don't know what I learned in doing this path that you haven't already learned by doing your paths. If I had figured out the one nugget of truth that I could explain to someone to make them an excellent speaker, I would certainly want to share it with you. The purpose of this project, as Debbie just stated, is for the member to reflect on his or her growth during the completion of an entire path. I've been in Toastmasters for about 15 years. I've undoubtedly grown in that time, but I'm not sure I could definitively say what growth has been due to completing this specific path. My company was making a video for a company meeting. It would be viewed by other people in my company and a few customers. They were interviewing all the employees with a video camera and asking questions about what they worked on. I thought of it as easy table topics questions, and the questions were about things I knew. Another employee who watched me being interviewed said she was impressed with how composed I was and how well I answered the questions. Is that growth? Is that due to completion of this path? To be honest, I learned to have a lot of cynicism about some aspects of Toastmasters. Allow me to vent for a few minutes, and afterward, I'll go back to being your inspiring president. I picked the path, engaging humor, hoping to hone my humorous speaking. I had already been giving speeches, which were, I hope, humorous. I had even won some humorous speeches contests. The first thing I learned was that most speeches on this path didn't have to be humorous. Yes, there was one speech on each level after the first with that focus. Know your sense of humor, engage your audience with humor, the power of humor in an impromptu speech, and deliver your message with humor. But the others were common to all paths or electives, which would usually say something like, your speech can be humorous, informational, or any style that appeals to you and supports your speech content. That is, most of the speeches in the engaging humor path don't need to be funny. In fact, this speech, which would appear to be the culmination of completing the engaging humor path, had the same direction and was not required to be humorous. This is a mixed blessing. It can be difficult for some of us to be funny on demand. And so the speeches do not require this of you. But on the other hand, how much was I learning to be funnier by giving non-humorous speeches? The second point is related to this and is something you may not have noticed. It's an overlooked secret that if you give a speech for a pathway project and you don't nail the timing, that is, you don't qualify for the best speaker vote, you generally still get credit for having completed the speech of that project. In fact, if the project is about, for example, body language or vocal variety, and you give the speech like a robot without moving, you still get credit for completing the speech of that project. But this is actually a good thing. As we say in the computer industry, that's not a bug, that's a feature. At Toastmasters, we assume you are trying to work on your timing, your body language, and your vocal variety, and all the other project focuses. Just because you haven't mastered it yet does not mean you didn't try and didn't learn something to be better the next time. I suppose the VPE might question if someone deserves credit for a project if they got up for 5 seconds and then sat back down. but I've never seen that happen. Based on all of this, the next thing I learned is that you get out of Toastmasters what you put into it. For some of us, simply getting up to give a speech in the first place is a big struggle. For them, giving a reasonable speech of any length is a great accomplishment. For others, it might be writing the speech, or one of the many other aspects of giving a speech. For what it's worth, I joined Toastmasters when I had a lot of experience being on stage in plays and musicals and had no problem getting up in front of an audience to give a rehearsed performance. But what I wanted to work on for myself was getting up to give an unscripted speech. I've now done that a few times, and I'm still working on it. For the other projects, nothing said I shouldn't make them humorous, for most of them. It was up to me how humorous I wanted to make them. There was clearly opportunity to give more humorous speeches and impromptu speeches. If I'm not funnier now than I was when I started the path, it's my own fault. And for someone who gives a speech without focusing on the required skills, their evaluator will hopefully give them some tips for improving the next time. Another thing I learned while doing this path, which some of you may not have learned yet, depending on how far you've gotten on your paths, is that as you get to higher levels on the path, the projects get harder, especially levels 4 and 5. The speeches there are generally longer, requiring more work. Even the electives there generally require much more work than just writing and giving a speech. For one elective, you need to plan a 3-month project, execute that project, and then give a speech about doing so. This is hard to do if you just start thinking about it 1 week in advance. Another requires you to start a podcast or blog, also hard to do in just 1 week. Also, as you get to higher levels on a path, there is less flexibility in what you can talk about. Ironically, I had some great ideas for humorous speeches, but there was no project on my level that it would fit for. Another, I learned to handle this by finding an elective on a lower level that it did fit for. Pathways does not prevent you from working on electives from previous levels. That is yet another thing I learned while doing this path. Or I could save the speech and give it later on another path. I felt that as I was progressing further through the path, Toastmasters was throwing unexpected hurdles at me. For example, this speech. I said at the beginning that I didn't want to reflect on my path. Yet Toastmasters wants me to write a longer than usual speech about this specific topic. Debbie indicated she also had some caveats about giving such a speech. Actually, level 5 has a complete this level like the other levels do. When you do that, you then find out you have this additional speech to give in order to really complete the level. Note that Toastmasters still lists me as a level 4 of engaging humor, even though I did complete what it initially showed for level 5. And this appears after level 5 in Basecamp. So it really seems to me that they are throwing an unexpected hurdle in the way. Another criticism I have of this project is that the purpose of the project for the member to reflect on his or her growth during the completion of an entire path was stated on the evaluation form, but was not listed in the text of the project itself. The project itself said, describe your experience moving through a path in detail. There's no mention of growth in this. This is just nitpicking, but an evaluator who read it from the form might point out that there was no discussion of growth in the speech, even though the speechwriter had not been directly instructed to do this. I only saw it when I happened to read the evaluation form that I was getting for Debbie. In conclusion, you get out of Toastmasters what you put into it. So work on the things you want to work on. Being able to handle unexpected hurdles is a great skill in life. So Toastmasters is helping prepare you. And hopefully, I won't have to rely on getting credit for a speech that was not long enough. Toastmaster of the Day.